And, you know, these sorts of dialogues, one thing that seems pretty clear is they haven't done much at all, if anything, to advance Washington's longstanding goal of trying to get China to change its state-dominated export-driven model and become more sort of consumer or consumption-driven. I know you've done a lot of work, which seems to suggest, based on capital flows from the very top, Xi Jinping, that's basically not what he wants to do. If you follow the money, that's not where the money is going. It's not going towards consumption. It's going towards, for example, for several years in the past, right, building out Belt and Road, et cetera.
I mean, that's right. China has been very reluctant to move towards a consumer-driven model. That requires some pretty fundamental changes in how China collects taxation, a less regressive tax system, one that relies much less on consumer taxes, much less on the equivalent of the Social Security tax in the United States, which in China is collected in a very regressive way, requires collecting income tax. It requires changing the relationship between the central government and the provinces. It requires the central government financing a lot more social expenditure. What Xi has done, particularly after the pandemic, he has notably not provided a lot of support for consumer or household spending. And he has directed, as the property market has contracted and as lending to the real estate sector has been falling, he's directed credit into the manufacturing sector. And you see that continuing. Manufacturing investment is up almost as much after the pandemic as residential or property investment is down. That's just fundamentally not a rebalancing of China's economy. Export growth has been providing close to half of China's growth in the past few quarters, over a 2 percentage point contribution from net exports. So China is really going to have to make some significant changes. That said, it doesn't take that much for the U.S. to lower the tariffs. I mean, the tariffs were raised incredibly quickly, without a lot of thought. And I think the U.S. is looking for an excuse, frankly, to bring the tariffs back down. The tariffs went too high too fast. And I'm pretty sure they didn't negotiate substantive changes in China's economic model over this weekend in Geneva.
You know, when it comes to, Brad, the consumption-driven model that you see Beijing being hesitant, reluctant to really foster, some China bulls say that you just need to be patient because it takes time, and it's just how their approach has been when it comes to consumer-driven models or stimulus and so on. But maybe the last week's announcement from the financial regulators and the PBOC there was really the sign of that impulse. And in the meantime, they're also focusing on some of the long-term strategic sectors, such as military, as well as artificial intelligence.
And I have no doubt that China's focused on artificial intelligence, focused on military catch-up, focused on semiconductor catch-up. No doubt there. I think the doubt is whether China deserves more time, in the sense that China's been saying they want to increase consumption for 20 years. They haven't shown the money, so to speak. They've never really put substantive big resources behind consumer spending. They haven't adjusted their tax system. Even the increase in pension spending that was announced earlier this year was minuscule. They haven't fundamentally reformed the hukou system. So there's a series of steps that, in my view, are needed. They're very fundamental, very deep reforms. And I think there needs to be a real commitment from the top, statements from the top leadership that suggest that President Xi is no longer concerned about so-called welfareism, that statements that indicate the central government is willing to provide a lot more financial resources for social insurance. So I think it's going to take a lot more than what China has announced so far. Certainly it is better for the world if China does make some progress here. And it would provide the basis over time for a healthier Sino-American economic relationship. But China just hasn't taken the policy steps under President Xi, who's been in charge for some time now, that would provide the basis for thinking that there's a credible, real commitment to change China's economic model.